Hello and welcome to Heartbeat. This week we'll bring you Peter's interview with Obianuju Ekeocha. I'll bring you headline news from home and abroad, and William will give us his viewpoint on the scrutiny of the assisted suicide bill in the House of Lords.
Obianuju Ekeocha is a UK-based biomedical scientist and founder of Culture of Life Africa, a pro-life initiative defending the sanctity of life in Africa. It's an initiative dedicated to the promotion and propagation of the gospel of life in Africa. And Obianuju joins me now. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Peter, for having me.
Can you just begin by telling us what was it that inspired you to take up pro-life work in the first place?
Right. So it all started back in 2012. I was, working as a biomedical scientist in the NHS. I had a job. I was happy. I felt everything was fine for me until one day I saw a project that was being promoted by Melinda Gates. Now the ex-wife of the billionaire Bill Gates, the Gates of the Gates Foundation. So she was promoting this huge, expensive contraception project, trying to raise funds within Western countries and among Western donors to take to African countries in order to provide contraception, what she was calling contraception project for women, and she was taking it to the various African countries. So that really touched a sore spot in me. And then I thought to myself, no, I must raise awareness about this. And I started speaking about it. But of course, once I started speaking about it, I started being called upon to different countries, to different African countries, to get a closer look at things. So I was doing a lot of traveling, a lot of studying, a lot of speaking with people, trying to learn from the various African countries to see how they were reacting and to all of these. And then it also brought me to the knowledge, really, and the realization that it wasn't just about Melinda Gates promoting this sort of culture among African countries. It was actually about a bigger picture where there were Western actors, Western nations, Western ideologues who were very much vested and interested in spreading a specific worldview that had to do with spreading contraception, spreading the knowledge of abortion, bringing in, graphic comprehensive sexuality education and things like that. Like this highly sexualized worldview from, if I could call it, the sexual revolution from the West.
From the Western world
Exactly.
to the rest of the world.
To the rest of the world.
And so you've spoken about ideological colonization.
That's right.
The idea that these ideas should be imposed, whether they're wanted or not, on other countries and other societies. What do you think is behind that? Is it, on the one hand, is it a population control agenda? Is it to say that, for example, birth rates are much higher in Africa than they are in the Western world, certainly than they are in Europe and Western Europe? Is it a feeling of the people there are threatened and we must make sure that the population of Africa reduces? Is it economic? Is it the fact that there's money to be made in these businesses, whether it is contraception, sterilization, abortion? They do make money. What do you think is behind it? What's motivating?
This is actually excellent because you've touched on a lot of the various reasons. I think from my own observation and just by studying and looking through what has been happening all these years, I think it's a confluence of reasons. It's not just the one reason. It is a confluence of an amalgamation of various movements and interests. So there are people who are coming at it from the point of view of, let's do population control. So these are the population control enthusiasts. There are the people who are doing it from the point of view of, the green energy movement. They too have their own thing, and they want to spread a certain idea or ideal. There are also the people who are so pro-abortion and so dedicated to the abortion movement, the contraception movement in the West, that they cannot stand the idea that there is any place in the world where people have even an opposing view. Even if it's not in their own country, even if it's not in their own region, they are interested in kind of spreading their ideas, their ideals, their ideologies. These people, I kind of think of them as more evangelistic about it, if I can say that. There are people also who come from this philanthropic point of view. So the Gates, the Clintons, the people who have formed all these foundations that are going to African countries, not really to spread education, not really to bring in water into villages, but to bring in these strange ideas that have come from the West, even if they're opposed to the value system in the various African countries. So these ones I call the philanthropic racists, so I take it as kind of philanthropic racism, where they're selecting various African countries to spread these kinds of horrible ideas too.
And is it an advantage to you that you are an African and you are talking about what's happening in Africa in a way that, for example, an organisation, say, like SPUC could talk about this, but wouldn't have the same credibility you would have?
Well, I think anybody, if you are living in the world that we are living in now, in this era, I think it's actually the obligation of everybody. Everyone has a right to speak up, even if you are from SPUC. If a child is being aborted in an African country because of something that somebody has come from the West to do, or something that they've come to promote, you have an obligation to say. So I'm somebody that I believe that there is a credibility that everybody should have for speaking for the right thing. But the fact that, yes, I'm an African and I get the opportunity and the privilege to speak about these things, I take it as a privilege. It's more, for me, a privilege. But I find that it also has sparked a lot of interest, because when I go home, I can speak in our language and explain to explain to it. I think that's a little advantage I have over SPUC. It's not because you don't have a right to speak about it as SPUC, but it's the fact that when I go there, I can sit on the floor and speak my language and explain to the woman in the village the reason why this is awful, or even they usually know that abortion is wrong. They know that. But it's the fact that I'm bringing this awareness that they should be careful and be aware that there are people who are coming from the West who are thinking for them to when they're thinking of putting an IUD into you, and it usually wakes people up. So it's a privilege.
So people, you say quite rightly, coming from the West in the form of some of those big philanthropic organizations and NGOs, but you've also talked, and I think you've also written about the government level organizations and the sort of supranational organizations like the United Nations and many of the agencies of the United Nations. And what have they done? I mean, they've drafted policies that basically support this agenda completely.
Oh, for sure. It was an eye-opener for me that the supranational organizations have become the mouthpiece of one strand of ideology in the West. It's not, it might be called the United Nations.
And so many people think, well, all nations are represented, and surely they can't do things against the will of a group of nations. But what you are revealing is that they do impose an agenda.
Yes. So it's shocking, to say the least, that a United Nations meeting that is meant to consist of the various countries, there are 190-something countries in the world, they gather together and you're thinking, okay, everybody's interest is being represented, but it's shocking to see that there are the superpowers and there are the voting blocs that are made up of the EU countries who then decide that the rest of the world should take on board healthcare as they see healthcare, which of course, when I'm talking of healthcare, I mean things like abortion that are then inserted very, very firmly into this concept of complete and let's say comprehensive healthcare. So an EU voting bloc within the United Nations will try to impose, they will say to African countries, if you don't have legal abortion, we're never going to give you a complete full mark. You're never going to be seen as developed enough in your healthcare system because you're not providing this particular service, which is abortion.
So effectively what happens within the UN and some of its organizational bodies is that certain privileges, trade, aid, and others are denied because African countries will not tick the abortion box or won't accept abortion as part of their own national policies.
Precisely. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of producing a documentary called Strings Attached. There are, in fact, strings attached every time that we speak about funding. every time that we speak about, the outcomes that are expected from a good healthcare, what does a good healthcare system look like? What does a good educational system look like? But for the people who are at these supranational organizations who are defining the terms and they are setting what is a complete, what is full education is one that has with it also comprehensive sexuality education, for example. What is complete and comprehensive healthcare? That is healthcare that includes abortion. It doesn't matter how good your system is. It doesn't matter how excellent your standards are. As long as you're not providing this, then you are always substandard. You are always seen as substandard. So it's a really horrible thing that when they talk of funding, they would say, but we cannot give you this funding because you're not really measuring up on all the indices and you're not really meeting up on all the targets. And at the targets, someone coming up with something like, for example, they had the Millennium Development Goals initially for a couple of years, and now we are currently on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDH. And then they bring up something like healthcare within that, or another point of interest is women's well-being, which is also a whole other indicator within that. But then they're saying, well, for it to be complete, it has to have like the so-called sexuality, what is it? Sexual and reproductive health and rights, SRHR.
Yes.
So these are all the things that the UN comes up with, and not just the UN. The EU does it as well, the supranational organization.
So effectively, this is why you talk of colonization.
That's right.
Because it's a new form, but a different form of colonization.
But they are in charge.
But it's still happening.
Absolutely.
And I suppose behind that is also what you might call the cultural colonization,
That's right.
which is Western media, Western news organizations, Western broadcasters who take for granted that these should be the default position and all countries should have that. And they broadcast to Africa and their products are seen and heard in Africa. And all the time, it's an attempt to change what is initially and originally a culture that respects life. And it's trying to undermine and to subvert that.
Perfectly put. Perfectly put. They have defined the terms. In a lot of African homes, in a lot of African, let's say, public spaces, let's say, for example, a banking hall in an African country, there would be a big television on the wall. 9 times out of 10, that's not local news. It might be a BBC. It might be a CNN. So we are ingesting without knowing it, or even without meaning it or intending it. We are ingesting a lot of Western media, a lot of Western entertainment. What is taken as really nice entertainment is like American movies, even in an African country. But what is within those movies? What are the things that they are now promoting? We're finding that a lot of the movies are no longer as harmless as entertainment was in 10, 15, 20 years ago. They're now talking about things, you're having people, they're talking about women's healthcare and they're meaning abortion. If they're talking about like some of the characters, they're LGBTQ, or maybe they're transgender, heroes. They're bringing in these different characters and they're showing it to our African children. Things we never saw before. And someone is like, what is this person, a man, a woman? All of these things are being introduced into African homes directly from Western entertainment industry and the Western media and the Western, cultural production. You can say the cultural production industry that
even though
producing
this same culture, in Western Europe, for example, has led to cultural and moral impoverishment and a spectacular decline in our birth rate to the point where many people would now say our continent is not sustainable. We have a significant problem with an aging population and a very, very low birth rate. And at some point, something has to give because we do not have enough people of working age. And you would hope that people in Africa would look and say, that's not the road we want to go down.
Precisely. See, the thing is, this is the reality, because all you have to do is just to search for the statistics in public domain. We already have from 2023 the reality that in England and Wales, the statistics show that there were more deaths than births in that year. That was the first time in 50 years, by the way. And that just happened 2 years ago. That's like some of the latest statistics. So it's very, very easy to find out some of these things. But unfortunately, that's not in the media. That doesn't make it into a movie that is made. It's not. But these are some of the things. We are sitting on a powder keg of gunpowder, and something that is about to explode. But so the Africans, they're not really seeing some of these things. Some of the I'd say the damages that have been done by the development of these kinds of culture and ideology within the West. That has already caused damage to the West, but then it's such ugly damage, but it's still being closed, and it's still being, they're still hiding it from sharing it. And whenever anything comes across to the African audience, if and when people get to find out, they're like, no, we don't want this for ourselves.
And are there more voices like yours who are joining this struggle and trying to raise awareness the way you are trying to raise awareness? Is there an audience for what you're saying? Do people want to hear it?
For sure. I'm just one little voice. But mind you, I've had a lot of encouragement and confidence in doing this. The reason being, all I have to do is to speak to one Episcopal conference in an African country. Is to get I just try to get them to invite me for one meeting. And by the time you know it, 20 or 30 African bishops are welcoming the message. Anywhere that I have gone, at high-level meetings, at little churches, at schools and in schools, I've done things at universities, even in African countries. There is always an incredibly welcoming audience and people saying, yes, no, we identify with this message. So I find that some of the easiest talks that I've given have been for African audiences in African countries.
And do you find that combining the message with a message of faith helps? Because often here what we will find is when you make a pro-life argument, people will dismiss it and they'll say, you only say that because you're religious or because it's your faith, as opposed to on any other sort of basis. Whereas again, a difference would be that the practice of faith is at higher level in most African countries than it is here, where it's sunk way below what it used to be. So combining with faith is a positive and is an asset for you.
I was just going to say that, yes, in the UK here, when you say something, you almost kind of self-censor and you're like, oh, let me not bring faith into it so that people can at least take me as scientific and all that. But in Africa, mind you, people are living out their faith so naturally. You talk to somebody, a stranger on the street, somebody selling something to you in a shop, for example, easily. I won't even ask the person, well, do you go to church? Do you believe in God? I'll say, God bless you. Thank God for your life, or something. Somebody can just tell you something on the street. But you ask yourself, well, they didn't even ask me if I go to church. It's that natural that, a teacher would say, oh, God bless this child, and no child goes home saying, mommy, my teacher is trying to get me into church. The faith is almost like the air we breathe. And nobody's asking, what's your faith? People just say, oh, God bless you. Jesus bless you. We talk about it. So of course, definitely it goes without saying that when I go into spaces or when I'm going to different places and I'm talking to anybody, whether it's in a government office, whether it is in a school room, in a university class, very confidently, yes, I can match up what I'm saying with faith. All the more reason why, an African will be, in most cases, will be more compelled when you even say, well, this is actually a moral duty, a Christian duty to take up this defense or, to take it just takes it sort of to the next level. It's not just that I'm doing this as a good citizen, I'm doing this as a Christian.
Yeah, and do you have hope that the next generation, the younger generation, particularly of Africans, will see this and will accept this and will want to stand up for their culture, for their beliefs, and for their own traditions and standards, and perhaps reject or at least push back on some of what you have described as ideological colonization?
Right. Actually, I'm a little bit reticent. I'm a little bit afraid for the African youth coming up because they are the ones who are most exposed to a lot of the Western developments, So, whereas our parents, many of them, of course, back then, yes, we didn't have internet. So, but now in Africa, kids are holding Facebook in their hands, and what's on their timeline? It's not Nigerian content. They're going through and they're seeing Cardi B. They're seeing like all the rap artists and they're looking at all the new musicals coming out from America. Some of them really, really horrible. Some of them very, very sexually explicit. So I am a little bit, if anything, just a little bit fearful or careful about the African youth, and not to take it for granted, because whereas I know I can walk into any office where there are African adults and I'll say something pro-life and I'm thinking, oh, they're gonna embrace me, or they're going to catch the message as I throw it, right? But I cannot say that for a fact if I'm going to go into like an African university classroom where it's the very young or the Gen Z Africans, because the Gen Z Africans are already now being exposed to the larger world. And sometimes perhaps they may not know how to choose or how to St. Paul said, test all spirits, how to discern and say that, there are these two things, but I see that this one is of God and this perhaps is not. So I would not take it for granted that, yes, the African youth, they're going to rise up, they're going to throw this away, they're going to reject this. I pray they do. But for them to do that, I think that is still a lot more work of awareness has to be done. It's not just my one voice speaking up. I think more work has to be done.
Maybe they need to hear how devastatingly dismal it is in many European countries where the birth rate has dropped so far below replacement level now that there are some places in Europe where there's no population and there's very, very little future. And that inevitably is what happens, as happened in China with the restrictive population control.
In Japan as
it's happened, and even though they try and reverse it, the die is cast and it's now too late and the culture has changed and it's very difficult to bring that back. Well, for all the work that you do to raise awareness here and across the world, Obianuju, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for watching SPUCTV. If you're enjoying our content, please subscribe and ring the bell for notifications.
A major national campaign to decriminalise abortion in Scotland has been launched, a move that SPUC believes will completely destroy unborn children's protection. The initiative, titled Let's Change the Act, aims to scrap criminal penalties and decriminalise abortion by replacing the Abortion Act of 1967. According to the campaigners, Scotland's current law is described as outdated and harmful and should be overturned. Decriminalisation does not simply affect legal language, it fundamentally shifts society's attitude towards unborn life by treating abortion purely as healthcare and removing criminal law safeguards. SPUC warn that the unborn, the most vulnerable among us, lose safeguards that reflect society's recognition of their dignity and rights. In fact, campaigners' claims about improving access and removing stigma ignore the reality that liberalising abortion has historically correlated with increased numbers of abortions. MSPs have been urged to reflect carefully on the moral, cultural and demographic implications of such a shift. Rather than consider decriminalisation and the horrific consequences which could follow, SPUC is calling for enhanced support for pregnant women and children, improved adoption and fostering infrastructure, and a renewed cultural commitment to life. Commenting on the issue, SPUC CEO John Deegan said, "Our society must protect women and unborn children, not elevate convenience over life. Decriminalising our already liberal abortion laws would demolish the limited protection which currently exists and allow thousands more abortions each year." Pop star Melanie Blatt of the chart-topping girl group All Saints has revealed that she and bandmate Nicole Appleton were allegedly pressured by their management to abort their pregnancies to preserve the band's momentum. According to Blatt, her decision to continue her pregnancy contrasted with Appleton's abortion, underlining the high cost paid by women whose careers were judged more important than their unborn children. The revelations highlight a troubling aspect of modern culture, the disposable status assigned to unborn children when they stand in the way of profit or public image. Clearly, this is not simply a matter of industry pressure, but a reflection of society's deeper devaluation of unborn life. If a young woman's pregnancy is considered a problem to be managed rather than a new life to be protected, then the culture of abortion becomes not a choice, but an expectation. Blatt's story exposes the coercive environment in which women may feel they have no real option but to remove their unborn child. This is more than an isolated anecdote. It is symptomatic of how abortion can become normalised when outside forces dictate that a baby's life is incompatible with success. SPUC believes that true choice must include the unborn child's right to life, and that support should be offered to both mother and child so that the pregnancy is never seen as something to be sacrificed for a career. Ultimately, there needs to be greater awareness of the pressures women face in the workplace and in the entertainment industry, and for robust protections that ensure no woman is ever told that her value lies only in her productivity. Melanie Blatt's courage in speaking out may help shine a light on the unseen victims of abortion, the unborn and the women coerced into ending their pregnancies. The Scottish Green MSP Patrick Harvey has come under fire for suggesting that if the assisted suicide bill being debated in Holyrood at the moment is passed, there should be buffer zones erected around every hospital and GP surgery in the country, making it illegal to act in any way that might influence someone who is intent on being killed from doing so. It's just over a year since the Abortion Services Safe Access Zones Scotland Act 2024 came into effect, creating 200 metres buffer zones around abortion facilities within which any action aimed at influencing a person's decision to access, provide or facilitate abortion services at the protected premises was banned. Harvey's proposal would mean the same level of restrictions would apply around any premises where assisted suicides were carried out. Speaking to SPUC TV, Michael Robinson, SPUC's Executive Director, commented on the proposal.
Not just content with creating buffer zones outside abortion clinics, the Greens once again have been determined to criminalise compassion, thought and prayer. This time, they're going after those that would like to offer help and support outside hospitals for those that are seeking assisted suicide.
The decision by NHS England to make the morning after pill freely available at nearly 10,000 community pharmacies across England represents a deeply troubling shift in national health policy. Under the new scheme, women can obtain the pill without payment or prior prescription in high street pharmacies. While presented as a measure to empower women and improve ease of access, SPUC argues this move both normalises and accelerates a culture of pregnancy being viewed as a problem rather than a gift. Obviously, emergency contraceptives are not without ethical consequence. While some forms of the pill act by preventing ovulation, other types have early abortifacient effects, which raises profound moral concerns. The message sent by making such pills freely and widely available is that unborn life is secondary to the convenience of avoiding pregnancy. Clearly, removing financial and procedural barriers creates a powerful presumption that the easiest option is to neutralise a potential pregnancy rather than to protect it. This is part of a broader cultural shift in which life is devalued. It is a far cry from a genuine healthcare framework that treats pregnancy and maternity support as a norm rather than assuming abortion as the fallback. SPUC advocates for a holistic support system for women, including timely counselling, maternity care, adoption services and practical help for families, to ensure that consenting to life is a real choice and not overshadowed by pressure or convenience. Until such supports are robustly in place, expansion of free access to emergency contraception and early-stage abortion medication should be met with concern rather than celebration. SPUC's annual Candlelight procession took place in Glasgow earlier this week, with hundreds of marchers turning out to show their support for life at every stage. SPUC TV's Peter Carney joined the marchers.
Despite the fact that it's a very cold and wet night in Glasgow, the enthusiasm for the marchers is in no way dimmed. This will be the 40th year there has been a pro-life procession in Glasgow, and for the last 10 years SPUC has been organising it, as has happened tonight. Let's talk to some of those who've turned out. David, how long have you been coming to the processions, or is this your first time?
No, I think this is about the fourth one we've come along to, and generally the weather's a bit more clement. Unfortunately today, a bit of a breeze, but it's great to see the turnout, great to see people coming together for something that's clearly a worthy cause in itself, but there's a bit of magic round the whole thing, round the Candlelight procession. And lovely people on the parade as well.
And how important is it, do you think, that people make a public show of their view that abortion should end?
I think it's very important. I think the religious message in general has been lost in public debate, but specifically around the abortion issue, thou shalt not kill. There's just no way around that, and it's been taken out of the public debate.
I'm joined now by Agnes, one of the marchers tonight. And I'm interested to ask you, is this the first time you've been to the pro-life procession?
Yes, I am here first time, yes.
And where have you travelled from?
We are from Poland.
And why do you think it's important that people come out and show publicly how they feel about abortion and the defence of life? Why is that important?
Okay, the law in Scotland is so against the babies, unborn babies, and I've got personally 3 kids, and I think every life matters, and we wanted just to show that actually having kids is great, and it's like a value in life, it's love, it's happiness, and that's why we're here, just to show that people don't have to be scared of having babies. They don't have to go and have puppies only. They can have babies and have a fantastic life.
So I'm joined now by John Deegan, the CEO of SPUC. John, why is it important that people are able to come out and publicly demonstrate their support for the unborn?
Well, we're seeing efforts at a political level to try and push off the pro-life voice from the public square. They're doing that in several ways. So to take the opportunity to get people onto the streets, to let our fellow citizens know that this is an important issue is crucial at this time. So we come tonight, it's a candlelit procession, it's symbolic. This is light in the darkness, and there's a darkness of conscience just now. Consciences are being darkened throughout our society because they're killing human beings, 300,000 a year in the UK, and no one is talking about it. It's important that we're here to be a witness to that.
Finally, a big thank you to all our viewers and subscribers, as SPUC TV now has over 15,000 subscribers and has had over 134,000 views. We're delighted with this success, and we know it wouldn't be possible without you. So please keep watching, subscribing and sharing. I'm Catherine Mokler, and that was SPUC TV News, bringing to light what others hide.
From the 22nd to the 23rd of October, a special select committee in the House of Lords heard oral evidence from expert witnesses on Kim Leadbeater's terminally ill adults end-of-life bill. It's fair to say the sessions threw up more than a few interesting moments. Not least of all, pro-bill members of the committee being unable to put aside their activism and asking blatantly leading or inappropriate questions. The witnesses also highlighted yet more flaws in this sloppily written bill. I'm William Curry, and this is Viewpoint. For starters, the sponsors let the cat out of the bag that at the heart of this bill is actually the idea of radical autonomy. The committee heard first from Kim Leadbeater MP, who introduced the bill in the Commons, and Lord Falconer of Thoroton, who is steering it through the Lords. What is the reason that these two politicians are bringing this bill forward? You would be forgiven for thinking that they aim to prevent terrible suffering at the end of life. After all, Lord Falconer began his speech in the second reading debate by referring to Lucy Davenport's husband, Tom, who had an agonising death from bile duct cancer. The debates in the Commons were full of stories of people suffering, Baroness Finlay therefore reasonably asked, "This bill has been promoted on the basis of a solution to severe pain and suffering. You have spoken about other countries, other jurisdictions that do include suffering in their legal definition. Why did you choose to not mention either pain or suffering anywhere in your qualifying conditions?" The response from Lord Falconer was, first of all, on suffering, "The essence of the bill is autonomy. You have a choice. We did not take the view that it is appropriate to have as a condition the suffering of an individual, which is a subjective matter. Once you satisfy that requirement, obviously, the safeguards have to be complied with. That is the essence of the bill. It is autonomy." That's the first cat out of the bag. This is not about suffering, as the bill has been sold, but about a radical idea of autonomy. The other was a shocking lack of concern for people with disabilities. Lord Falconer made the highly questionable claim that there is absolutely no evidence from abroad that there is a particular problem in relation to disabled people, and carried on to say, in relation to people with various learning difficulties or autism, again, with proper assistance, they too can have that option. In other words, assisted death. In addition, the bill sponsors continued the trend of misleading about what's actually in the bill. Lord Falconer said that Clause 5 requires doctors to make sure all options are made available. There is no such requirement. The clause only refers to a duty to discuss options. Kim Leadbeater rejected an amendment in committee to guarantee a meeting with a palliative care specialist. Falconer also claimed that practically everybody who has looked at this issue has found palliative care goes up where it's introduced. This is misleading. The biggest recent study, cited by the Association for Palliative Medicine, concluded assisted suicide is impeding the development of palliative care. On a question about people in Oregon citing being a burden as a reason for choosing assisted suicide, he said that the reasons given are, first of all, a lack of autonomy, secondly, a lack of dignity, and thirdly, pain and suffering. The item that you refer to, feeling a burden, is, I think, 6th or 7th, and is one of a number of items. Again, this is simply not true. Oregon's Death with Dignity Act annual data summary has routinely recorded feelings of being a burden on family, friends, or caregivers within the top 5 end-of-life concerns. Between half or nearly half of all those receiving a lethal prescription in each of the last 5 years have cited this as a reason for seeking a premature death. This issue has been consistently ranked higher than inadequate pain control. In 2024, 42% expressed this concern, as opposed to 34% for pain control. You may have been aware that the decriminalisation of suicide in 1961, on the grounds that you cannot prosecute someone who has committed suicide, and prosecuting someone who attempts it is clearly unhelpful and uncompassionate, did not create a right to suicide. Why would we have suicide prevention measures if it were a right? Baroness Hayter, however, seemed genuinely shocked when former Chief Coroner Thomas Teague, KC, explained this to her. You'd think that someone examining a bill that amends the Suicide Act might look up what the current law on it is. So many questions remain unanswered. The second evidence session on Thursday was especially interesting, with evidence from Thomas Teague and from Dr. Susie Lishman, lead on medical examiners at the Royal College of Pathologists. I personally learnt a lot about the role of medical examiners, who now routinely examine all deaths from a medical point of view, and coroners, who investigate any deaths with a suspected unnatural element. The bill is seeking to obfuscate the fact that deaths under the bill would be suicides by not classing them as unnatural, and so not referring them to the coroner. Dr. Leishman explained that if a death is not referred to the coroner, they would automatically come under the medical examiners. However, they are not mentioned at all in the bill. This leads to many questions that the bill does not answer. Will medical examiners receive extra training to take on examining assisted deaths? Where patients have not told their families of their plans, will the medical examiners have to be the first to tell them that their loved one has died by assisted suicide? Will they have access to documents from the panel that approves assisted deaths? As they do not have any legal investigative role, how will they determine on matters like coercion? Will they even have enough information to refer to the coroner if necessary? Could they essentially be trained to act as a coroner? If that's necessary, why not just stick to the normal procedure and involve the coroner? A final key takeaway is that medical and care bodies still have serious concerns about the bill. Dr. Annabel Price reiterated the Royal College of Psychiatrists' position that they cannot support this bill, despite being neutral on the principle. The Royal College of GPs insist that they don't want it to be part of general medicine. Damningly, in fact, their representative, Dr. Mulholland, said that the whole question of making decisions for assisted dying is against everything that I have been trained in, and I've practiced for 30 plus years. Professor Mumtaz Patel from the Royal College of Physicians expressed her fears that people would opt for an assisted death because of a lack of palliative care options. Luke Gogan of the British Association of Social Workers expressed a similar view, saying, "Social care in this country is in crisis. If you're not getting the care services and support services which you're entitled to, an assisted death may be something which you wouldn't have considered otherwise." Overall then, it was a pretty damning advertisement for this bill, and its supporters' treatment of the well-reasoned concerns put forward by expert witnesses exposed their increasing desperation. Emotive stories can take the argument so far, but the more detailed scrutiny this bill gets, the more flaws are revealed. All we can do is hope that peers are listening.
That's all we have time for this week. If you enjoyed the show, then please like, comment and subscribe for weekly videos. And if you have any stories you think we should cover, then please email us at the address on screen or in the description. Thank you for watching.